One thing that can completely derail your fantasy season is getting the wrong cheapies and wasting trades early. Welcome back, guys. I'm Longy here from The Casual Athlete, and we've got Monty from Quickfire Fantasy. We're going to be talking to you guys about the top cheapies, going position by position, giving you our opinions on these guys, and talking about whether they are worth a trade. Now, Monty, first question to you here. Which one of these do you think is the biggest trap that new fantasy players are falling into?
I think for me personally, the last question, does the player fit in your team? I reckon it's a huge trap that most new fantasy players get into. They see a player that had a really good score for 1 week. They try and squeeze them into their team, but they overstock up on, let's say, halves, for example. And then you have, I know a couple people have a couple night wing fullbacks. They're on the bye. You're left with one player short. So I think it's very important to look at your team and see what positions you really need.
Yeah, great point. Got to have cover at every position. That's the big thing there. These other points here too are worth considering. So does this player have a secure role in consistent minutes? Is that role going to be impacted by players coming back from injury? So we talk about the Roosters. We're going to talk about Blake Steep in this video. But we saw Spencer Leniu, Lindsay Collins, and also Victor Radley come back this week. Nat and Egan Butcher come back soon. You know, that can threaten those minutes. Then does the player have upside? So are they someone who can score big enough to be worth making money? Someone like Jackson Purdue, for example, or we talk about Royce Hunt all the time. Maybe don't have that upside. So maybe they were mistakes for us. And then is there cash making potential? So is that player going to make cash? Is the break even relatively friendly? Is there going to be enough time for them to make that money? Now, let's tear right into this. So we're going to go position by position. Hookers up first. And I'm going to throw to you, Monty. What are your thoughts here on Pete Mamazelis?
Pete Mamazelis, at the end of last year, we knew he was getting that starting role for the Rabbitohs, but for how long? There was Humphreys lurking, Havili, we weren't too sure. But from these first two games, Mamazelis has almost locked in that hooker role for the next couple of rounds, with Humphreys locking in that half spot. And you look at his stats, he's averaging 41 and a half tackles a game in 76 minutes. And for me personally, I projected him around that 65, 70 minutes. So he's playing the full 80 most of the time. And he's averaging 47. So I think by far he will be one of the top 3 cash makers for the year.
Yeah, he's a monster. I will say too, the attacking output from him in big moments for South Sydney, so away from fantasy, he's done enough to help them win games where he's secured that role for himself. The fact that Dodd is injured too, it just adds to the security. So yeah, Mamazelis, look, must have. If you don't have him, go get him, but I'd say most of us do have him. Corey Pakes is the next one here, and he had a more normal game for him last week, so a better score from him. Last week, he cranked out about 44 tackles. It was a more competitive game as opposed to the previous week where he scored 32 with a try, right? So I'm looking at Corey Pakes here and thinking, yeah, he's going to make some cash, but not worth the buy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think he's a buy, unfortunately. Although that hooker half duel is tempting, but you just got to stay away. We've seen it in the past. He's never really been a good fantasy scorer, so I reckon there are much better options at that price point, for sure.
Agree. And then jumping right down to the bottom, 249K, very cheap. Made 19K so far. Riley Smith, and he's a guy who was elevated to the Parramatta squad very late in the preseason, so he wasn't in the top 30 originally. Got rushed in, got that bench role, and has played about sort of 55 minutes a week and secured a reasonably solid work rate. So if you go through these numbers here, 30 tackles a game, not a lot of run meters there, a couple of missed tackles, a couple of errors where he's really playing hard to try and get something happening at a struggling Parramatta side. I think he's a guy who he looks decent and he'll get some more attacking stats as Para play better. And he's earning his spot in the team.
I personally don't agree with Riley Smith. I think most Para players this year are traps. The way they're playing, you don't know what Jason Rolls will do 1 week to the next. And I just think there's too much risk in Para players in general. We saw round 1, there was heaps of changes into round 2. So you just don't know with Para players at the moment. And Riley Smith could be one of those guys who loses his job come round 4.
The risk there, though, is if you let him fly, let's say you need a backup hooker, right? So you're someone who doesn't have Watson or Grant, Mamazelis is your primary there, and you need a cash out. I think for that kind of team, he's the kind of guy that you plug right in, and he's looked better and better with the minutes. So it's interesting. We've got a bit of a clash there, but we'll see how it plays out. For middle and edge here, next, we've got Hamish Stewart, Blake Steep, and Kidioni Kautoga. For Stewart here, I love watching Stewart play. Like he's a big boy, young guy, looks fantastic. He was a guy I was almost certainly going to bring into my fantasy side until the David Clemmer news broke. That just sort of turned me off it because I thought, Clemmer coming in, he probably steals that starting spot. That moves Emre Gula back to the bench. That threatens Stewart. Then we have Tom Eisenhuth coming back as well. We have the bye in round 3. It's just a bit too much mess for me. So I let him go, and my attitude is still probably that he has to be let go.
Yeah, Hamish Stewart, I'm very 50-50 on him. I don't get it what's with the Dragons signing old front rowers, because I was keen on Couchman to start the year, and then obviously Hamish Stewart, and then Clem has really put me off those Dragons forwards. I would love to get one of them in the team, and Hamish Stewart, he looks the piece. He's passed the eye test for sure. And then he's very similar to Blake Steep, who's 305k. He's made 55k this season, but then there's that risk with Lenu and Collins coming back. I like Blake Steep. He killed it in Cup, and he's just another one like Hamish Stewart. We're just not too sure of his minutes in the future.
Yeah, Steep's a machine. I looked very closely at that last week, potentially doing Jackson Purdue to Steep, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it with all the guys coming back so soon. Like he isn't in their top 17. That's the concern there. So when we go back to those questions, the security isn't there. But if you want to back the talent, both of those guys are guys who, if they can keep getting minutes, they're going to keep producing massive points. And it's borderline PPM basically for these guys, so it's absolutely fantastic. Kidione Kautoga is in a very different camp, so not a particularly noteworthy fantasy producer. Scored 24 points in 60 minutes last week. Pretty embarrassing game against the Tigers where everyone at Parramatta played poorly, and he had a few nice moments, but then also had some pretty bad defensive reads. He trained in the preseason as a starting back rower, so it makes me think that maybe there might be a late reshuffle closer to the game. Madison's on the extended bench as well. Maybe Kautoga goes onto that edge spot, and maybe someone like Jack Williams moves back into the middle forward rotation. I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but at 255k and getting the 60 minutes last week, it's pretty tempting, especially with the centre eligibility too.
Yeah, that centre duel is tempting, and with Kautoga, he against the Tigers, he made some sloppy errors here and there, but then again, it comes down to if he gets named. For me personally, I just wouldn't trust him if he's coming off the bench. But as you said there, if there are late changes, definitely worth a look. Maybe a week or two, but for that cheap, all he needs is a start, and if he can get 80 minutes, he's definitely one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, he's one I'm genuinely considering buying this week. Actually, I want it. I don't want Stafford Toa. We're gonna get to Toa in a sec. I just don't really like the Stafford Toa buy with Taylor May potentially popping up, and Kautoga. We're going to talk about Francis as well. Like they're guys I'm more interested in the back line. Jumping through to the half spot, and we've got a couple of guys here who everyone's got, and then Harris Tavita, who no one does. So Sandon Smith, Jack Cole, Harris Tavita. I'll throw to you first. Which one of these guys has really jumped off the page for you?
Sandon Smith's had a cracking start to the season. As we know, it's 2 tries, 1 try in each game. Yep. He's running the ball heaps, which is good. And then Harris Tavita, I chucked him in there because he was one who just popped off the page. I was going through the averages, and I was like, he's averaged 44. Harris Tavita, they have 45k already. He's really flown under the radar because we thought Metcalf was going to take all the kicking, but that hasn't happened. But he is very expensive, Harris Tavita, but you'd have to lean Sandon Smith just in this range.
Yeah, that price point, it's about 400k. He has made 45k for those who bought him though, and he started the year sort of in that mid 300s. Very interesting. Sandon, I will say, he has some low scores in him. So everyone, we're all getting excited. We love it. We love the cash. He will score under 20 at some point in the next month of footy. Like, it's going to happen. We're seeing this 45.5 average on the back of a try a game. He's not going to score every week, right? But he's going to have some attacking involvements here and there. So I would just be ready for the fact that you're going to cop a 15-point game out of him at some point. Jack Cole's another one that's really interesting. So Cole is playing that sort of running 6 role minus the running, which is not great for us in fantasy. Now, I was thinking Cole might show out last week because I thought the Panthers would beat the Roosters reserve grade side, but the Roosters came out and won. And I'll tell you what, 2% of the people on TBC tipped the Roosters. So basically no one was on it. So yeah, for Cole, I just haven't seen enough to trust him in any way. You got 53 metres run a game. You got the 5 missed tackles there as well. He does not kick the ball at all. It's a 24 average. They got the Storm this week. If I didn't have Cole, I wouldn't feel bad about it. And I do have Cole, so I'm going to stick with him unless he gets dropped.
Yeah, Cole's currently in my emergency spot at the moment. He's very reliant on tackles. As we can see, average 22.5 tackles a game to start the year. So if he doesn't get those tackles, he misses 5. It's just very risky to have in your score in 17. And like you said, I reckon I was confident on him last week against the Panthers, but obviously not. And then that leads us into the Roosters. Rob Toyer, easily, I reckon he'll be the highest cash maker of the year.
Wow.
And he's shown out to start his first 2 games. He's definitely one I'm very excited on to watch for the rest of the year.
Yeah, mate, unstoppable. So again, he was one I was a bit questionable about last week. I had him in the loophole spot. Luckily, took his score. Same with Sandon Smith. But for him, 38 points in that Panthers game without big attacking stats. You got no tries for him yet either. And you're pumping out a 45.5 average. He's absolutely fantastic. 127 meters run a game. I think that's going to increase as the year goes on. The defensive output's fine as well. Tackle breaks 4. I think that's going to increase too. So I'm looking at Rob Torre and thinking there's probably upside in this average, which is crazy to say with a rookie center who's averaging 45 already. In terms of cash gen, and you're saying he's going to be that top guy, do you think it's going to be 700K at some point, or where do you see him peaking?
I predict at the start of the year it'll be very similar to Kale Iro last year. He'll be He got 64 without a try against the Broncos, and I just think he ticks all the boxes in the checklist earlier. He has the upside. His role's very secure, and he's made 100K in 2 games, and I don't see that slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie Humphries would be hard to catch, though, money-wise. That's my pick, but Toya's a good shout there. And then Jackson Purdue is going the wrong way. He's minus 5K. And this has been a frustrating one to own. 81 run meters a game is not a lot. 9 tackles is even less than not a lot. 3 missed tackles eats up 66% of that tackle production. and you've got a try in there, but the 18 average is just brutal. So for him, look, he was on his way to a decent-ish score last week in a game where the Cowboys got absolutely spanked, but got himself sin-binned. Like, it just hasn't gone right for him, and the matchups coming up over the next 3 weeks are brutal as well. I'm going to throw a question to you, though. Do you think he holds his spot long enough to see the easier day games where he could potentially break out?
Oh, it's a tough question because we have seen Todd Payton change his team a lot over the past 2 weeks, and I was expecting Purdue to be the one missing out over Duffy, but obviously Payton thinks otherwise. I think he can. The way he's going, he just has to clean up those missed tackles. He has been targeted a lot.
Yep.
So I reckon that won't slow down, but I reckon he can. If he can hold it out for a couple more weeks, you never know what could happen. He could definitely turn his price around for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you can stick with him unless he gets dropped. That's my advice on any of these cash cows. And Stafford Toa, I'm going to throw some numbers at you, and I'm keen to get your opinion here. So for Stafford Toa, historical numbers, he's usually been a guy who averages in the 20s. In 2024, he wasn't really involved, so I'm not counting that. 2023, he averaged a 38.5. So that was one of his best years, playing at center for that year. Look, 38.5 is great. And you throw in the fact that he was on a wooden spoon Tigers side, that probably bumps up this year because they're a better team. So you could potentially project him to jump into the 40s if you want to back that sort of statistical narrative. The risk is Taylor May potentially signing, and that probably removing Stafford Toa from the team instead of someone like Skelton. So that's the coin toss you're making here. Which way are you leaning on this one, Monty?
I actually started the year with Stafford Toa, so I didn't have Purdue. I went Stafford Toa, and he's coming off the back of injuries, and I just trusted him. Pre-season, he was training really well, and that was evident last week against Parramatta, to be fair. But he was after the ball, as we saw. 19 tackles for a centre is Rob Toyot levels, which is awesome. But 8 tackle breaks, he won't be doing that every week. But that 19 tackles and 130 metres, that's just over 20 points in base. So I reckon it's only up from here with Toya.
We've seen him bust out 100-plus games as well. So he has that ceiling, and that was up against Val Holmes back in the day actually too, right? So he can go get that done. I personally, I'm not as excited about him just because he is that pure center. So for my roster composition, I'm trying to lean away from him and try to look at some of these wing fullbacks, which we're going to talk about next. But that pure center is something I need a little bit less than a wing fullback. Now, the wing fullback spot, first up, guy we both have, right? Sevelia Tamale, absolute machine. I'm just going to read these numbers here. 167 meters a game, 1.5 line breaks a game, not many missed tackles, 5 tackle breaks a game. He has a try every second game as well. Mid-40s average. Look, he's a guy who topped New South Wales Cup in line breaks, tackle breaks, and run meters. And it's not a surprise to me at all that he's doing this in such a good Canberra side.
Yeah, he's just got a very fantasy-relevant game. And him grabbing that centre and wing fullback duel has made it so much easier. But you just watch him and you just know he's going to score well. Although a slow start last week, he really saved himself in the back end. But the numbers speak for themselves. It's just pretty incredible to see a rookie, pump out these numbers, very similar to Rob Toya. And then we go on to Mark Nwanganita-Waze, and he has been another fun player to watch. Last week against the Panthers, he was one of the best on the field. And I reckon that he's very similar to Rob Toya, but Billy Smith lurking. Can he keep the job? That's the question with him.
Yeah, the stats are okay though. Like in New South Wales Cup, he averaged pretty well. These stats here, 96 meters. I think that's going to go up as we go along. He's a good ball runner. Not a lot of missed tackles there. He's an aerial threat as well. So this is probably thinking ahead a bit too far. But when they get Sam Walker back, probably some more pinpoint kicks put across to him. I don't know. I think we haven't seen the ceiling of Mark Nwani Tuasa yet. And he's going to have a few of those ceiling games that bump his average up. But he probably does have a few of those quiet games too. Like, it's just hard to read with the Roosters. They're a team that came out and they got destroyed by the Broncos, and then they came and beat Penrith. So I don't really know who they are. Like in preseason, I didn't think they'd be good. Now I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point you raised. But from watching the Roosters the last 2 weeks, they don't seem afraid to spread the ball this year.
Yeah.
As we saw, Rob Toyer. I love Rob Toyer. His first touch, he made that break because they decided to spread it early, and we noticed how the Roosters spread the ball on second or third tackle, and Sandon Smith scores in the corner. So I really like their expansive footy, and that's why I think Marky Mark and Toyer are really excelling to start the year.
And whereas another guy here who's playing in a style of footy that's not as good, Isaiah Yongi. Look, 153 metres a game is fine. 2.5 tackle breaks a game is fine as well. The 22 average is not great. 4 missed tackles a game is not great. It's not his fault, most of this, though. So Parramatta are playing some absolutely brutal footy. And look, I can rant about Parramatta being garbage all day. Like they have really broken my heart this year. So I'm going to throw it to you to be a bit more objective than me. Is he worth holding at 340K?
I believe he is worth holding. He hasn't had any real attacking stats yet. It's only tackle breaks for him. He had, and I think, 1 line break. So he hasn't had any assist, any tries. Like
He had that try against the Storm.
Yeah, he had that try.
Consolation.
Yeah, consolation try. But he just hasn't had any real attacking stats yet. So I reckon they're just around the corner. And he's worth holding. I think everyone's got him, so you're not really missing out on much. But then again, can Para, start playing better again? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. And I think they can. Yeah,
I would say Tom Duffy's a more priority sell as well, right? So Tom Duffy's obviously gone. Yongi, you probably need the cover. So if you've got Greg Marzu, Kalen Ponga, Bradman Best, Dylan Lucas, you're going to be missing a couple of players next week. I bet that you don't have enough wing fullbacks to cover that if you sell Yongi. I'm near certain. And if you do, then your roster's absolutely crazy. So stick with him a couple more weeks, give him a shot. But at the same time, I would temper expectations. So our forecast on him was 35 to 40 if Para can play good footy this year. That second part's not coming true, but in reserve grade, those were his numbers. He was a 38 average fullback. So, yeah, I worry a little bit about this one. But like you said, should fluke a few decent plays. Like we look at, remember Hayes Perham at the Dogs?
Hayes Perham, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like he wasn't playing great footy, but he had a couple of fluke games that boosted his cash generation. So, yeah, stick with Yongi a little bit longer. Potentially think about moving him if he sort of keeps stalling here. Not losing cash at a fast rate anyway. And then Tony Francis I've put in here too. And we can talk about Robert Derby as well, because they're base price guys. They're coming in for hamstring injuries. So Tony Francis, probably 4 to 6 weeks that Khan Pereira's out. I love the profile on this guy. So big boy, has dominated in Queensland Cup, can score a try, can break a tackle. Runs the ball a bunch. My concern here is I've chatted to a few people around the Titans, and look, it's not confirmed, but there's a bit of chat that they might move Bo Firma to centre, move Sami to the wing, and then they can get Fafita into the starting team because they want to keep Khalees Haas in there as well. That ruins Bo Firma, but it also ruins my boy Tony Francis, and they play so late in the round that I can't trade a Cowboy for him. So I reckon I'm going to have to let this one slide, which is absolutely heartbreaking for me because he's a pod that I want to jump onto.
Yeah, definitely. He's got that. I did some research. He averaged 42 in Queensland Cup on the wing, which is pretty insane. But yeah, as what you said, just uncertain with the team list. Like I do like the look of him. I would go Duffy to Tony Francis, but then again, as what you're saying with Phil Sami lurking, you just don't know. He's probably more of a draft pickup for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe just wait one more week and then assess from there.
And then Rob Derby, the other one to look at here. Less attractive to me, so I think the Titans will figure out their attack pretty soon. So that's why I'm pro Francis. Derby, I like as a player. Super talented guy. Had a couple of rough games in the trials, but the Cowboys attack, like they've got such rough matchups. And, where are the attacking points going to come from is the big question. Even Murray Taulagi, who's not a bad fantasy producer, has dropped about 70K this year, right? So he's kind of on my watch list, actually. If he gets down to about 350, I'll jump on him. But yeah, there's not a lot of points on offer out there. We've seen Purdue struggle. We've seen Vilea struggle. I just think you have to let Robert Derby slide, unless you think he's going to break teams on his own. But as a rookie winger, it's not likely.
Yeah, I reckon I'd let that one through to the keeper personally. Cowboys just don't look like scoring tries at all. I think a couple of the tries have been off Scott Drinkwater line breaks 50 metres down the field. So they just never look like scoring, and I just don't think it's worth the risk in your fantasy teams.
Yeah, he's going to have to score a couple of tries right at the end, which is what Braden Burns did round 1, Drinkwater did round 2. But yeah, that's the cheapies, guys. So look, with the cheapie, I think there's these key questions that you've put together, Monty, here. So the secure role, do they have upside? Do they have that cash making potential? And does it fit your team? I guess the other question is it worth 100K plus? So if you're selling someone who you think is going to make 40K, you want the cheapie to make 140K to be worth that, because trades are valuable. I know right now it feels like we have heaps of them, but by the end of the year, you'll be remembering these trades and ruining the day. Any last words from you, Monty?
No, just make sure that you don't stress about your trades too much. You just got to make sure you make the right ones. And
easier said than done.
100%.
You heard it here first, guys. Just make the right trades. That's all you got to do. Super easy. That's cheapies done and dusted. Cheers, guys.